me when a moment came to stop me on a dime. I spent most of the next days looking at the x-rays, talking about the options and talking about sweet time. And I asked him when it's thinking that this might be the real end. How's it hit you when you get that kind of news? Man, what do you do? I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu. And I loved deeper, and I spoke sweeter, and I gave forgiveness I've been denying. I said, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying.
So probably, I don't know, a year or so ago, I met this wonderful man called Tom Leach. And Roz, who I've known for such a long time, and she came up to me and she says, "You've got to hear his story." She says, this is my significant other, and he's got a story to tell. And since then, I've got to know Tom, and it's my joy today to bring him here to speak to you about his near-death experience. Tom?
When Reverend Rose first asked me to do this talk, I was filled with excitement and joy, and that rapidly turned to fear and terror. Not because I don't know what it is I'm talking about, it's because I only have 20 minutes in which to do it. But it also came from my programming, and what I have to start with is, you all know me from when I've been here, which is when I've been different. I was a very much different person the first 40-some years of my life. I was told over and over again that I would never amount to anything. And then I spent my life proving them right. I was told that I wasn't smart enough, that I might as well just be a janitor, because I couldn't aspire to be anything else. And the worst one of all was that I was pretty much unattractive. Yeah, I know, this wonderful species in front of you, and yet, but I spent my life hearing those negative voices of, I'm not this, I can't do that. And so in my 40s, I was a living shell. I'm a very pleasant person on the outside, but I was empty on the inside. I was a very passionate sports fan. I'm a Baltimore guy, and I'm a Ravens fan. And if the Ravens lost on Sunday, don't talk to me until next Sunday after we win. So I was that kind of on the edge kind of person. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I was working full-time, I was playing soccer full-time, and I was drinking full-time. And I'd like to admit that I was very good at all three. But it wasn't what life was supposed to be about. There was still a core of me that knew that there was a better life, and I didn't know how to find it. Well, God has a plan for that, for all of us. So, in February of 2008, I had a silent heart attack. And I had been an EMT for many years prior to that, so I knew just enough to be dangerous. And so I'm sitting in the gym trying to figure out what was happening, because I couldn't stand up. I couldn't sit down, so I had to lay down on a bench and call the paramedic. When the paramedics showed up, I knew what they were doing. I looked at him and I said, let's go. He says, yeah, you're in a full-blown heart attack. I'm talking to him, feeling nothing. And all the other heart attacks that I had been on, the people were in a lot of pain, and we tried to alleviate that pain. So that kind of threw me off just a little bit. Then we get to the hospital, and they put me in a room that's probably this big. I could reach on either side. And they're running around trying to, work on me. And I can hear the monitor behind me. And I know what it sounds like. I also know what it sounds like when it's not working, or straight line, as it's called. So I heard the monitor go straight line, and my logical brain says, that's probably not a good thing. I had a nurse who was in my face, literally in my face, saying, Mr. Leach, please stay with us. Keep your eyes open. We need you to keep your eyes open. And I'm looking right at her. She had blonde hair, she had blue eyes, she had pink scrubs, and I'm talking to her, and she never heard a word. Again, my mind said, this might not be a good thing. I've been a photographer in my life as well, so I know the difference of an angle, what it does to change a photograph. When you start looking at somebody's forehead instead of into their eyes, something is changing. And not long after that, I entered what would be called a tunnel by most people, because we can't really describe what it is. It's darkness, it's emptiness, it's the source of all knowledge. And here I am right in the middle of it, and off in the distance, like that clock in the back of the room, there's a light. And that light, without any sound, without any motion, without anything, was around me. I was greeted by my father, who had passed in 1990. I smelt aqua velva. It's a smell you never forget. I felt the wagging of a tail on my leg. And this was my dog, Taffy. And if you ever hear me tell the whole story, you'll understand how important a piece she is in that story. My grandparents were there. There were thousands of people there. All I know is that while I was there, I felt peace and love and joy. It's like I took a warm blanket. I know you guys don't do warm blankets down here. But from Maryland, we put a warm blanket around us to keep warm, and we huddle up, and it feels so good. It's the first time in my existence that I had ever felt that good. I think it was, 47 at the time. So 47 years. I had never felt this intense peace and love and joy and welcomeness. Now, while I was there, they'd love to give you what's called a life review. We will all experience a life review. Unfortunately, how many folks here were raised Roman Catholic? Oh, I'm so sorry. As a Roman Catholic, I was sure that I was going to go to the pearly gates. I was going to meet St. Peter. He was going to tell me that there's a high road and there's a low road. I was really sure that I was not taking the high road. The only good news was none of my friends were either, so at least I'd have some company. But this is what I was afraid of. I was deathly afraid of dying. And all of a sudden, after my father, my dog, the light, the tunnel, all of this, that I figured out, I really am dead. And that washed over me. And it was like, that's no big deal, so what? This thing that I had been afraid of my whole life is nothing more than a transition we're all going to make. And it's so joyful, and it's so peaceful, and we dread it so much here because we've been told the wrong things about it. So here I am in my life review, and I did two things that I never thought I would do in heaven. The first was cry. I cried because I saw a scene of my life that I wasn't exactly kind to someone. And I saw it from their perspective. So in other words, I heard the words coming into their ears and felt their emotions. And it was probably one of my lower moments in life. And so I cried. I also saw the best moment of my life. And it's nothing like what we have been taught. Didn't have to do with any cars or houses or jobs. And I'm lucky enough I have a photograph of this moment so I can relive it whenever I want. It was when I was holding my son and I'm feeding him. And in my life review, I could feel his shoulders moving in the blanket. And I could smell the formula. And anybody who's been a parent knows what formula smells like. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the most important moments of your life. Those moments of unconditional love. And what can be more unconditional than wanting to feed your children? The next thing, they told me I had to leave. And this is where I did the second thing I never thought I'd do in heaven. I argued with my angels. And I did not win. I'm here. Last week we talked about a man some 2,000 years ago who we weren't very kind to, who we killed. We put him in a grave. And 3 days later, he came out of that grave and gave us hope and joy and love that he had been talking about for 33 years. We all have the opportunity to be reborn every day. In some traditions they call it dying daily. So you don't have to literally die to be reborn. Some places carry it too far, as with anything. But here we are, every morning, having the choice of what kind of day we're going to have. Better yet, what kind of day we're going to give someone else. So, and we talked about PMH Atwater a little while ago. PMH is a researcher on near-death experiences. She said 75% of all near-death experiencers who are in a relationship, when their near-death experience happens, within 5 years they're no longer in that relationship. And the reason is we're different people. Dear friend of mine, Dave Bennett, he was an adrenaline junkie. He was a diver, you know, the deep sea diver with the bell and the helmet and all that. He was, and his wife married him because he was an adrenaline junkie. And when he came back, he wasn't the adrenaline junkie anymore, and she couldn't handle that. So he was divorced within 3 years. I made it just under 5 years. Because my wife had no idea who I was anymore. Because I was a different person. Not just the talked about different person. I didn't get excited about football anymore. I still love it, don't get me wrong. But I didn't have the passion for those kinds of things. What I had passion for was opening the door for people at the Wawa. What I had a passion for was talking to people who once talked to me and I didn't care what they had to say. Now all of a sudden I cared. Afterwards I opened a hot dog cart in my town, Bel Air, Maryland, on Main Street. And I was determined no one would go past me without hearing, "Hello, how are you? Have a wonderful day." You are going to smile. I didn't care whether you bought anything from me or not, but you were going to smile. And it made so much of an impression, and I'm not, believe me, I have no ego, so I don't pat myself on the back, but after a while I got noticed by the town. And they started asking me if I would sweep the streets. So I would go out at 4 o'clock in the morning and sweep Main Street, and then I'd get ready and do my hot dog day, and then I'd do my other 3 jobs after that. It gave me an opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with God every day. And I mean a conversation. It went both ways. This is something that a Roman Catholic, we weren't told we could do. See, I had to pray to St. Christopher, who prayed to Jesus, and Jesus would put a call in to God, and then God's secretary may or may not get back to me at some point, and then my prayer may or may not have been answered in the manner in which I appreciated. But I'm having real conversation. I still do. I have conversations. He's laughing at me now. I have real conversations with God. And I remember I would have a question for God as I'm walking down the street. And if I got the answer right, I got a quarter. Now, we had parking meters and all this, but you really don't find quarters falling out of people's pockets and landing on the ledge of a building or a window. In one particular case, I needed money. I needed $100, something fierce, or my hot dog cart was going to be out of business. And I prayed, I said, God, I'm sorry, I need, by the end of the day, I need $100, and we got to find it somewhere. And I took 3 steps, and here's a crisp, fresh $100 bill laying on the ground. So I already knew that God existed. I knew that God answered our prayers. I didn't know God carried cash. Good thing to know. But I was a different person. So much so, I actually walked next to a friend of mine from high school for about 10 minutes, and he started telling me a story of something him and a friend of his had done in high school. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I was there. And it was at that moment he realized that he was talking to me. He had no idea who I was. Before my heart attack, I weighed 285 pounds. The reason I weighed 285 pounds is because I didn't like me. So my mom made really great cakes, and when you hear the really long story, you'll get the point. Mom made great cakes, and I ate a lot of cakes. But I didn't like me, so much so that I could not look in a mirror. I didn't like me. I used to have hair. And it curls in the back. So I learned to curl my hair with one of those round brushes. Never looking at the mirror. I got really good at doing that. When they kicked me out, and I love to say that, by the way, they did kick me out. It's like a movie. You ever hear that thing at the end of the movie that the message is echoing? Well, I heard, remember to love, love, love. I'm like, what are you talking about? I had no clue what they meant. And it's taken me 10 years to start figuring out some of it. The most important part of it is to remember to love ourselves. Because when we go home, you're going to get more loving than you ever thought possible. Because they think we're rock stars. They can't wait for us to come back and say, hey, this is what we did. You got to see Unity in Merritt Island. They're growing. They're excited. So that everybody is excited for us to come back home. The choice, folks, in rebirth, in living your life as a different person, always begins with you. And it always begins with, how do I feel about me? Because if I don't love me, it's hard for me to express love to someone else because they don't know what it is. So I'm telling you today that yes, it is wonderful where we're going. And if anybody wants to ask me about my fear of dying or anything else about this, I will talk for days. The hardest thing to do with an NDE is to get them to shut up. Because we are so filled with that joy and that excitement to move on and to share with everyone. So if you've ever been afraid of dying, you ever wonder what heaven's been like, take all of those fears that you've ever had, wipe them away, and then start today to be that different person. Love that song. Live like you were dying. Because that's what we try to do. Every day I go to work, I drive these bridges over to Route 1, and I am like, oh my God, I live in paradise. You have palm trees everywhere. You have sunshine. You have nice people. You have pools. Thank you. And every day is a moment to say, I love you. And I love you. And I love you. And I really love you. And I love me. And that's where it starts. That's where your rebirth actually begins. How much do you love yourself? Is it enough? Is there more? Always. But live each day as if you had died overnight. And when you wake up that next morning, you're appreciative of everything. You want to climb the Rockies. You want to do all those things that you never thought you could do. And you want to do them with joy in your heart. So rebirth is joy, is heaven. And that's where we're all headed. Thank you.